last time on Chronicles of a Dreamer, I started writing seriously at the age of 12 when I listened to the Pilgrim's Progress audio dramas. I was intrigued by this story. I emailed Mr. Pappas and asked him if he had any scripts for Mariana. Unbeknownst to him, I had already started writing my version of what I thought would happen. I began writing in a notebook, a Mead composition notebook. The entry on the first page reads, 10/10/2002, Pilgrim's Progress Part 3, Chapter 1. Narrator. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I came to a familiar place where was a den, and as I laid me down to sleep, I dreamed again a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw 3 boys who were named Thaddeus, John, and Paul. My attention was soon drawn to a sign on the wall which said, "The House of the Interpreter." John was speaking to Paul about something, and I captured the last part. And in parentheses, Thaddeus was pacing back and forth. John. So you see, Paul, my sermon here I put together for Mariana. Paul. Oh, are we going to stupidity sometime? Now, true to character, I included myself and my friends in the story, and then renamed us, so that's what the Thaddeus, John, and Paul is. I used that technique because it was comfortable for me, as I had done so with Dangers at Stormy Mountain, a smaller production which had been completed earlier that year. Later on, I entered my notes into the computer. It's interesting to note that at this time I was paranoid about saving things because they would take up space on the computer, so I printed them. I now know that Word documents, .doc back then and now docx for those interested, take up very little space, and it would have been more efficient if I had saved them. But, I was just learning, and the first 3 pages of my first type entry read as follows. Narrator. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I alighted upon a familiar place where was a den, and as I laid me down to sleep, I dreamed again a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw 3 boys who were named Thaddeus, John, and Paul. My attention was soon drawn to a sign on the wall which said, "The House of the Interpreter." John was talking to Paul about something, and I caught the last part. Thaddeus, also in the room, was pacing back and forth. John. So you see, Paul, this sermon here I put together for Mariana. Paul. Oh, are we going to stupidity today? John. Aye. Paul. To Mariana's Inn, no less. John. Aye again, but I won't preach at her house. You're going to the cathedral then? Aye. Paul. Thaddeus, you look preoccupied. John. Does that mean you won't? Of course not. I'll go and get the horses ready to leave in 10 minutes. Voice fading. That was Thad's line. Anyway. John, I wonder why Thad was pacing back and forth. Paul, do you know? Narrator. While they were preparing to leave, Paul explained to John that it had been 6 years since Greatheart had supposedly died at Vanity Fair, and although Greatheart was not there... Hey, that rhymes. Although Greatheart was not there, Thaddeus had taken Greatheart's mission, which was to convince Mariana to go on pilgrimage, on himself. So they set out for stupidity. I was very specific in what I did. I wanted the text to look like my handwritten entries, or at the very least, as close to them as possible. So the font I used was Times New Roman with italic turned on. That made it look, like handwriting, or pretty close anyway. The only difference is that I had them at size 24 back then. It was easier on my eyes. I now use size 12 or even 11. It was important to me at this point to begin the story in a slightly different place than the other 2 parts. In both part 1 and 2, the story opened with them moaning and groaning and desirous of finding a way out of the miseries of sin. No problem with that, you understand. I just wanted something else. This is partially due to my original approach in incorporating myself and my friends into the story, but also a response to one of my friends who I had shared Pilgrim's Progress 2 with. He thought the moaning and groaning was a bit much. and from a certain point of view, I could understand. So I set out to make Mariana different. After a time, however, I decided to return to the elements that made Pilgrim's Progress great in the first place, but to do so in a different way. You'll see what I mean in a moment. But now I'd like to take you to another one of my rewrites, where I went back to the main idea of doing an almost exact copy of Christiana. Pilgrim's Progress Part 3, Chapter 1. Dark Horizons. Pilgrim's Progress Original Soundtrack 1. That would be the soundtrack that plays during the opening narration in the new amplified Pilgrim's Progress audios, which if you want to check out, you can go to orionsgate.org. Okay, moving on. Narrator. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted on a familiar place where was a den. And as I laid me down in that place to sleep, I dreamed again a dream. I dreamed, and behold, I saw a woman clothed in a humble garb, standing in the door of her home. Her face was turned away from her house, and she looked with great longing across a distant, wide, wide field. And as she looked, she wept and trembled. Now this is nearly an exact lift of the opening narration from the Pilgrim's Progress 2 audios. It goes on. Mariana, O my husband, my poor dear Standfast, how I have broken thy heart with my stubborn refusal to thy merciful invitation to join thee in the way, and how I have treated thee in a manner most vile. Oh, that I had accepted thy tender entreaties to go on pilgrimage, but now I must bear the results of my evil actions. This city is surely sentenced to destruction. Moreover, my hands are stained with the blood of my little ones who might have gone on with their father had it not been for my example. Narrator. Now as she stood staring with wet eyes across the swirling black clouds that hovered in the sky, obscuring her view of the horizon, her 5 children came to her. Rachel. Mother, are you all right? Mariana. I was just thinking about your father. Amos. Mother, father hath been gone of a long time. Why can't we rid ourselves of this sense of dreadful loss, as with others who have lost a loved one? Mariana. Because I have sinned him away by my wretched behavior toward him. For such as I, the sorrow only grows with the passage of time. Asahel. Oh, mother, is there nothing we can say to comfort you? Mariana. Nothing. He is gone. And that which makes my mind even more distressed is that I not only stayed behind, but also kept you, my children, from going. Your blood is upon my hands. Micah. I don't see any blood, mother. Esther. Me neither. Amos. It's proverbial blood. Micah and Esther. Proverbial what? Amos. Proverbial. The blood on mother's hands is emblematic in character. Esther. What? Mariana. It means that I'm held accountable for your remaining here. Micah. Oh. Rachel. But mother, isn't there a chance that we might follow after father? Mariana. I wish there might be. Amos. But mother, is there hope? Mariana. I don't know. Children. Oh. As you can tell if you've read the new Amplified Pilgrim's Progress books or listened to the tapes, I've changed the words around a bit, replacing some of them, but it's essentially the same scene as Christiana. You'll also notice that my style has changed a bit. Now this is something you can't see if you're listening to me. If you want to see it, go to jaguarjenterprise.wordpress.com and you can see what I'm talking about. But anyways, I'll go ahead and describe it. I enclosed the characters' statements in quotation marks, but I discovered that doing a dash, a space bar, and another dash was quite time-consuming, so I changed it to just a colon and 3 spaces, followed by the quotation marks. Another thing I started doing here was giving my chapters titles. It helped me to better construct them. I continued with this approach for a while, but it just wasn't working. I wasn't getting what I wanted. And worse still, I didn't know what I wanted. I even tried another approach, going back to Standfast before he went on pilgrimage and chronicling a little bit of that before transitioning to Mariana and continuing with the story from there. That attempt was pretty short-lived, but it went as follows. Narrator. As I walked through the wilderness of this world, I lighted upon a familiar place where was a den, and as I laid me down in that place to sleep, I dreamed again. I dreamed, and behold, I saw a man clothed with rags standing in the door of his home. His face was turned away from his own house, and his eyes looked with great distress at the western horizon, which was beginning to gather blackness. As he looked, he spoke gloomily to himself. Lethargy. How shall I escape the evils of drinking? In this place it is considered the only way to have fun. And indeed, on the one hand, it seems to bring me pleasure, but on the other, it leaves my life in ruins and causes me to hurt my loved ones. Is this all there is to life? Have fun for a little while and then wake up to the realization of where I really am? Narrator. As he was thus musing to himself, his brother Steadfast approached. Steadfast. Greetings, Standfast. Lethargy. Greetings. Steadfast. Why the gloominess, my brother? Lethargy. Because in this town of stupidity I see nothing but empty pleasures and death. Steadfast. Ah. Lethargy. But pray tell, Indifference, why did you address me as Standfast? You know my name is Lethargy. As usual, I have drawn on my entire knowledge base to construct this scene, which is as far as my idea went for this approach. Also, I had changed my writing method again, this time with emotion guides inserted in parentheses, and I also omitted the quotation marks on either end of the dialogue. This was necessary to save both time and space. I had also adjusted to the standard non-italicized way of typing, or of font rather, and I also began using size 12 at this point. And while this approach didn't last long enough for me to finish the scene, it did play a part in what my final approach would be. I think it was about this time that I acquired the Pilgrim's Progress 2 book by Mr. Pappas. This opened up a whole new world for me as I learned the answers to some of the questions which had been generated by the audio. And it was my intention to continue as seamlessly from the end of Pilgrim's Progress Part 2 as possible, story-wise. I studied all the information I could find in the book on Mariana, and I was in for some surprises. First, I discovered that Mariana was the Duchess of Stupidity. Stupidity being the town in which she dwelt. And her husband, the Duke. Aha, this was going to be different. I had seen her as a poor widow who had set up an inn to support herself in her husband's absence. I now saw her as a high-class woman, an aristocrat, if you will, who enjoyed all the trappings of wealth, luxury, and power. It was a very different story, but I decided to change to meet this new image for the above-mentioned reasons. Next time on Chronicles of a Dreamer. As I was writing, I began to implement an idea which I had dismissed as impossible, setting Mariana in the 21st century, without explaining too much, of course, because I would not want to take away from the spiritual nature of this incredible story.